I actually saw like I was on YouTube like this morning, man, and this lady was speaking about Stormzy and the Black Messiah complex. Turns out Stormzy has been paying out tuition fees for some black students in the UK.
Okay.
But she was speaking about how that is useless, man, because it turns out even if you go to like an Ivy League in the UK, you still won't get paid the same way as someone who is not of ethnic color, like someone who's black or Chinese or whatever. If you are white, then it works for you. But if you're not, then turns out you won't get paid as much as you would if you were white. So she was talking about this whole mental issue, man, that black people have that makes them feel like, you know how it is, like the black tax we call it. Like where
of course,
if you're black and then you become successful, then you're sort of put in this position where you sort of have to become the savior. Yeah, that's what's and the implications that come like mental health wise regarding such things. But yeah, well beyond that, bro.
Yeah, I've speaking of black tax, man. I've actually seen a thread on Twitter of this lady that she was complaining about the black tax that is actually driving her into mental institution because the expectation was just so much she couldn't deal with it anymore. So you see, when stress starts to affect your daily functions, then it becomes a problem.
It is. I mean, and the other problem is that, like, if you're going to be in the workplace or at school, right? So imagine we don't have the same backgrounds. And now, let's say if you're on a scholarship and it gets paid out, right? So each of you gets a certain amount. And then now the expectations from the supervisors or whoever gave you that money are the same for each of you, right? But I mean, it's not the same because you don't have the same responsibilities. Somebody has generations of wealth behind them, and somebody does not. So now, if somebody does not show up at work or at school because of things like that we're talking about now, like mental health issues, right? Sometimes it's not easily understood by people who don't have the similar circumstances to you. So I guess black tax it goes deep.
I suppose there's many factors that can go into black tax.
Exactly, yeah. And that also happens to be the story that we are about to tell here. A story so old that, I mean, if we have to imagine, I think it starts from as far back as we can try to fathom right now. Like, it's for as long as human beings have been thinking, right? Mental health issues have been a thing. So I think that's the story that we're going to be looking at today. So what's going on? Welcome to the Bro Philosophy Podcast, the show that keeps you up to date with issues to do with modern society. And joining me are my closest friends. They will introduce themselves.
Wait, Ephraim.
Hi guys, my name is Apure.
Exactly. So, so we're going to just dive into it now. We've spoken about how the story about depression, mental health basically, is a very old one. And since the beginning of time, people have been dealing with these issues. But we're going to try and explore to see how far deep the problem has been in that time and now. Exactly. So we just so happen to be in Africa. So we'll be trying to relate each one of the issues that we have here to the African context. So I don't know. I guess maybe a question that I could ask the guys is, isn't it strange that you could actually walk into a psychiatric evaluation and come out and not come out and just find yourself in involuntary commitment? Is that
you can?
You can.
Wait, so you don't have a choice?
According to certain guidelines, I mean.
Wait, so you don't have a choice? Oh, actually, yeah. I think if they find that you're a risk to yourself, they can actually detain you. Yeah, but that's messed up, though, man.
It is messed up.
But like, what if you don't want help, though? Like, yeah.
How can you not want? Yeah, exactly. I mean, it feeds into this thing that I was thinking the other day about, things like assisted suicide and liberty of death. It doesn't seem like you have those liberties. You can't just kill yourself for some reason. I don't know if it's a spiritual one or it's a philosophical one. I'm not too sure, but it's for some reason you don't have those liberties. You're just not supposed to do that.
But speaking of spirituality, man, because I think the main aim of today is to find reasons as to why mental health is such a big thing, right? And the causes of it, right? I've always wondered, man, like, do you think religion in itself is one of the biggest impactors or causes of mental health? Because I feel like for me, it has been the biggest problem for my mental health.
How so?
Okay.
'Cause I feel like, okay, I think
So maybe before you get into how it has been a problem for you, right? So we just want to lay base, put a landscape to which we'll put this discussion, right? So
Yeah.
obviously you've put a point about, religion, right? But it also feeds, or it also goes hand in hand with two other factors, right? So that'll be your body
Mm-hmm.
and the mental, your mind, exactly, right?
Yeah.
So we just want to lay it all out and, maybe briefly discuss about that. And then maybe you can start because you have already touched on the spiritual concept about this whole mental health issue, right?
But okay, I think just to make things simpler, bro. Like maybe we might just wanna define what mental health is.
Well, it is defined as
Going cuckoo.
What?
Nah, I'm playing.
it's the illness of it's the illness or disorders that affect your thinking capabilities, your behavior, your thought process. Yeah, so it is
Mental
basically defined as that, and there are different types of mental health illnesses such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, ADHD, OCD, and all those, bipolar. So there are different kinds of illnesses.
Yeah.
So basically it has to do with your brain mostly. Because it's your
Okay.
thought process and eventually your behavior. Because what you think is what you process, and then you
It
and then
manifests
act
as
on-
behavior.
and then
yeah,
manifest as
exactly.
behavior. So it's basically around that. That's how they define it. The mental
Okay.
illness.
From what I read, though, it turns out it's highly unlikely that a person will only have one isolated mental health problem. So, for example, if you have anxiety, you'll have anxiety and depression.
Okay.
You see, so if you have bipolar, chances are you'll have another
That's gonna
thing
be,
that will feed
Maybe
into it.
also
Addiction to alcohol. It turns out is also, things like that are associated with each other. So, like, mental health problems normally come as a group, not just one group. But I think just to make things more streamlined, man,
Okay.
I think we should focus on specific mental health problems that we feel like are the biggest problems at the moment. Because there's many mental health
Yeah.
Yeah, of
problems
course.
that we can cover.
Yeah.
I think the prevalent one in Africa is probably depression and anxiety. I'm not sure. Maybe you can. I don't know if I've heard about a case of bipolar or PTSD as well. PTSD probably the biggest one.
But
Like
and all of those things fall into one group, though.
Yeah.
PTSD, anxiety, depression.
Yeah, I think so. So it's like you also have personality disorders, right? So I think that is also prevalent, but not in the same way that the other two are.
yeah, definitely.
So I guess it's important to discuss like how it affects a person. So it's like if I am to think about personality disorders, right? Like I mean, the one thing that's possibly very important in this life is how you interact with other human beings, right? So it's like there are certain personality traits that are outside of the norm that make you not so sociable, or maybe people do not want to associate with you because you're of a certain kind. And I think that's how many of these disorders have been defined, basically. So it's things that are outside the norm. So it's like if you're gonna be a person that's secluded in nature, right, and you don't want to be with other people, or maybe you're a narcissist, basically, right? You think about yourself first, and everything that serves you comes first, and nothing else matters. In a sense, that's
Yeah, I suppose personality disorders feed into mental disorders.
exactly. Yeah, that's a subsection.
Yeah.
Of
Sort
it,
of,
yeah.
yeah. They
So
sort of.
it's-
I still feel like the personal disorders are not.
They're not a
really-
mental disorder. It's just something that's inherent, like within you. But they do play a big role, though.
And in
Yeah.
Africa, I think in
Wow.
African context, they are not seen as a major problem.
They are, bro. I'm pretty sure they are. Though we may not call them.
We see the effects. We see the effects. It's
Go
just-
to African homes and see if their personal disorders are seen as a huge problem.
Well, the thing is,
And even mental illness altogether.
education now is the problem, Chief. I don't think most African people, especially our older people who are not
Yeah,
educated,
definitely.
would know that you have a personality disorder, right? For them, you're just being weird. Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like
I
I guess
think
it's,
Just being cheeky.
it's-
Yeah,
really
like, hey, what's
hiding.
wrong with you? Like,
I think the point that I'm possibly getting from this is that there's the existence of a disease and acknowledging that it exists, right? So it's like I feel as though in the African context we possibly had all these things, throughout time.
We've always had
Yeah,
that,
but
And it's just, we probably did not acknowledge it. So it's like, I hear what you're saying about how it's not so much of an important thing, but I sometimes think that people are very extreme in saying that we've never really tried to engage with it. Because if, like, this one person that I found on this website, I think it's SADAG, like it's an organization about mental health, you know, specifically focusing on anxiety and depression, right? So this one guy was saying that, I mean, if you look across African languages, you won't find a word that describes depression or anxiety, right? And I beg to differ, because in Shona, that's the country I come from, right? Zimbabwe, I mean. I come from Zimbabwe, right? So it's, in Shona, you have anxiety, which is kufunganya.
Is it? People, do you have like a word to define anxiety in Xhosa? Because I don't think we have words like that in Sweden. I don't think in Sweden we have such words to define anxiety or depression. I mean, no, I can't think of any words.
Yeah, well, with depression, it's kusuruwara. You see, so it's like we have two words that describe this phenomenon. So it's like, sometimes I feel as though if you're going to be sitting in an office or maybe modern society where some of the deep words have obviously started to shed off easily, we don't really know about it. But that's not to say people have not long acknowledged it.
No, I'm sure they have, man. Because in where does Nisa come from? Rwanda.
Rwanda, yeah.
They actually have a cultural way of dealing with depression. So you know how it is in the modern time, man. People just give you medication, antidepressants.
I see.
Expect that you'll be fine. Obviously, they'll stimulate happy hormones within you.
I
and
see.
you should be more cheerful and happy thoughts and whatever. Which of course is simply just getting rid of the symptoms and not really helping.
Of course, yeah.
So what they do in Rwanda is they have community. I don't know how to explain this thing. It's like they do community exercises where people are encouraged to be part of the community instead of being isolated. Because I think most of the mental issues come due to people being isolated. You may not be isolated because you are alone, but you may simply just feel isolated because people just don't understand the type of person you are. Where you can't maybe you just can't be yourself, but you are still around the people all the time, but you conform to what they want you to be instead of being yourself. Obviously, there could be many reasons, but from what I've noticed, isolation and alienation seems to be the main cause of why people become depressed. That is.
And it's also a physical presentation of depression. So it's like once you sit in this position where you are depressed, you tend to want to seclude yourself, right? So that's a self-defeating thing to do as a person that's depressed, because you wanna just chill and not go and meet other people outside. But it's also the thing that pushes you further deep into depression. You see.
But so I mean, it's sort of like a feedback loop in itself.
Negative feedback, yeah.
It's like a loop that feeds within itself. I don't know how to explain. If you look at it, it starts from anxiety, right? You are in a social setting. People seem like they don't accept you, they alienate you. You try to conform and become. Obviously, you start becoming anxious now because you're walking on eggshells. Like your personality type is simply just not fitting with them. So you're trying to figure out what you should be so that you become accepted, which makes you anxious now, and always scared to make mistakes, and you're always anxious. Exactly. Eventually, your depression will leave you feeling like, okay, maybe the best way is to be simply
stay away.
Stay away.
Yeah, that's true.
But that just makes things worse now.
Exactly.
Then you become even more cut off now. You don't know how now to.
Yeah, it's a very regressive condition. I mean, you know, the word itself actually says depression, right? So that's like possibly your lowest point in life. So it's really a sad situation.
Yeah, Chief, we know some of us have been through these things.
When? What happened?
My nigga, the depression. I think depression comes for everyone, man. Obviously, people come with like seasonal depressions, like
it does happen. Yeah,
I'm just depressed for a week and I'm fine.
But do you consider that a depression or just stressed? Because I feel like there's a difference between being depressed and being stressed. And I feel like most people are riding the wave of depression. Yeah. They are just stressed for that moment.
Yeah, I think that would qualify as stress.
Yeah.
But I think for me, man, I've had like depression for like almost like a while. More than a long time.
I feel like
a long time.
It can be defined in the following way. If it's a frequent thing that stresses you and it causes you to not be functional in your daily activity, then that will be different. Depression.
Definitely, yeah.
But if it's stress,
the thing is you have two types of depression, right? You have people who have functioning depression. You're depressed, but you function very well. No one can even tell that you're depressed. That's a functioning depressive person. Then you have people who have clinical depression, where it's like waking up from your bed is like a chore. You just don't care. You don't. People call it like, well, they explain it as you lose interest in things you normally used to enjoy doing. You isolate yourself and all of the stuff. And
which is true.
yeah. And the thing, like, just life just has no meaning. You're simply just. That's where the people become suicidal now.
Yeah.
I've seen a whole list of things that they look at, before they diagnose anybody with depression, right? So I don't know exactly what they are, but it seems as though you have to at least have 5 of those things ticked out, right? And then they can say you are depressed, and then maybe further classification will be what you were saying.
So what are these
some
5
people
things?
are
Got those symptoms.
yeah, well, it's parts of the things that he said, like, being secluded in society and, just losing interest in
Feeling
things that
tired.
you used to, feeling tired,
Become
always,
suicidal.
sleepiness, suicidal thoughts, and a whole list, so I think, it'll be important for us and people that are viewing this episode to go and find these things out, because maybe it's one way that you can see if anybody in your family or a friend or just a random person might be depressed.
Yeah.
Or maybe somebody at the office, right?
I suppose so, bro. But I don't know. But since you asked, what was the question you were asking? Like, what happened?
No. What I was saying is that I feel like people are overdiagnosing themselves with depression. So now I was saying that there must be a difference between stress and depression.
Yeah, no.
So-
Yeah, there is a difference. Now, the thing is, you were asking me when I said I've been depressed.
Yeah, I
like,
was asking you
happened,
what happened.
which is a very difficult thing to answer.
You
Okay, so
don't have
it's-
to go into the whole
No, in
thing.
fact, so it's we can give him some time to think about it.
Yeah.
And if you would like to share a story, then we can he can say that, because it's this other guy, Ben Ockery, said.
Oh, close.
Yeah. So this other guy said, stories can conquer fear. They can make the heart bigger in a way. So I think, much of this podcast is going to have stories shared here and there, possibly not from our personal stories, but we'll just give an account of things that might have happened that led to somebody having a depression, right? So we're going to look at things that possibly lead to depression, right? So it's, I guess, maybe off the top of my head, I've heard of things like, burning out from too much activity. Like, let's say you're at work and then there's just a lot for you to do. And also maybe at home you just have a lot to do, so you're burnt out now. So it's that being overwhelmed might lead somebody into depression in a way, or anxiety, depending on how bad the thing is, right? So I don't know if you guys know about things that could lead to depression. You did say a few things.
I think just being antisocial, man, is the main cause of people becoming depressed. Which, of course, that has to do with the way that people are raised, I guess. Because it turns out, based on psychology, the child has until 4 years old to be socialized, to basically be considered normal, I guess, behave like normal people. If you're not socialized by the time you're 4 years old, you become antisocial. Of course, you can become any of the two extremes. Can be extremely violent, or extremely just passive. Which both of them just leads into you being isolated, and eventually you'll be alienated from society. If you get what I mean. If you're totally violent, you'll eventually be in prison. But if you're passive, obviously you don't know how to stand up for yourself, man. You're bullied, all of those things. You eventually still feel isolated. You know, because I think being in a society, you need to be balanced between the aggression and the passiveness. You need to know when to be passive, when to be aggressive.
Yeah,
but you need to have both of those qualities within you.
Yeah, so failure to regulate those emotions is possibly
So
problematic thing.
So can you say that your environment before you were born is also can cause depression as well? Maybe while you were still an infant, your mom was drinking and smoking. Can that cause?
No, so I don't think I got your question right.
Yeah,
did you say before you were born or just after? Or maybe around the time of birth?
During pregnancy, let's say during pregnancy, your mom was
Oh, okay.
drinking
and smoking.
So I don't have such information, but I do know that if the mom is drinking or smoking, right, smoking, well, there's a plethora of problems that you might have. So, like, let's say with drinking, there is this thing called FASD, right?
Yeah.
So that's fetal alcohol syndrome disorder or something of the sort, right? Or fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, actually. So I mean, obviously, from just hearing the word spectrum in there, it just means
It's
that
a range of
it's a
things.
range of
Yeah.
things that people suffer from, right? So it's depending on
But aren't
where
those
you fall.
but aren't those personality disorders though more than mental ones?
That's what I was
No,
trying
but
to
they are.
get at.
They are mental though, because it's like if you have FASD, then even your facial features change, right? So even the way that your brain is wired is also a little different
It will
from
change.
from normal people.
And neurotransmitters will change as well, which will
Exactly.
lead to more depression.
Exactly. So
suppose.
now, exactly. So it's like as I was looking at one of the stats, I was teaching a class about FASD the other time, and I was looking at the stats, and it appeared to say that most people that have, let me not say most people, have suicidal thoughts and an actual act of suicide somewhere along their lives. Possibly because maybe their lives are not as comfortable as other people in a way. Or maybe because most of the time you can't know that you're not smart until you are tested. So if you can see that your friends or family are performing much better than you do, then that might actually put a lot of pressure on you.
But
Yeah.
have you guys ever experienced any form of depression or anxieties or whatever?
Well, I have, and and what can I say? Going along with what we were speaking about. No, in fact, the example that I had given, right? Like having too much work, right? So it's like, well, this is a thing that I actually literally just walked into. So it's like I put a lot on myself. I was like a secretary of UCT Football Club at the time, and I had to be working towards my upgrade, right? And on top of that, I was doing this accounting thing where it's actually business accounting, I think. No, business statistics. So I was writing certain scripts for a company because I needed the money, right? So you can see how much was on my plate at the time, and I thought I could manage it, but at the end of the day, and also having to deal with personal relationships with friends
Yeah.
and women in your life. So obviously now you can look at that. Even family as well also have certain expectations for you. And now all that concentrated in one single moment in time made me crack in a sense. So it's like
So I get burnt
it
out.
was first, I had burnt out. So it was first, what do you call it? Anxiety, right? So where obviously I could feel that I'm not feeling really great. And then after a while, I got into a depressive mood where I was just like, always down. But I was working still, just not in the same pace as I was when I was okay, I guess. But I wouldn't say I had the most severe depression. I think it's like a thing that I
Feels
would easily
normal.
brush off after a while, I guess. But it took some time, though.
Yeah. So I think what you just described now is one of the causes. In fact, there are many causes that you've just described now, which is the stressful, basically the stressful situation in your life, which could lead to depression, financial problems, relation problems with your family or your partner. So those are some of the causes that you've described as well. So, but from my side, I don't recall any
These are like
case. No, what do you mean?
Yeah, well, it's crazy.
well, I mean, like you're lucky enough not to have encountered depression.
Well, there's something in what
Yeah.
he's saying because it's also based on luck because you do get depression because you have genetic vulnerabilities.
Exactly. That's
So
another one
that's
as well,
luck of the draw. You
Maybe
just don't
someone-
have it, so maybe you're just happy. You're just gonna be a happy person like that.
And these people who are so cheerful, man. It pisses me off. Why? So
But we've been cheerful like a lot, but it's just not to say you don't have problems,
Yeah.
I mean, it happens in episodes, just like how depression does. So some people are just very happy on the outside.
yeah, bro. I think for
And maybe
me,
when they sit in their corners, it's a different story.
I don't think I can be happy myself out on the outside if I'm not happy on the inside.
Oh, I see.
I can't pretend to be happy if I'm not happy, man. I think that's the biggest problem for me.
I see.
Some people are just happy every day, bro. Like you meet the person, it's like, hi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like, how? Like, I've never seen this person sad.
I suppose if people have problems, but they find a way to deal with them.
Yeah, I
and
see.
and those problems are not part of. I mean, they are not. They might not be too much for them or overwhelming for them to such an extent that they become depressed.
Yeah, that's true.
Even if they are happy, they still have problems. That's what I'm trying to highlight.
Yeah, it depends.
But-
I mean,
But then the-
coming to you, man.
Huh.
Would you like now to
so maybe as he gets ready.
Yeah.
Well, as he gets ready, I just want to share something interesting that I found out. So they said women are more vulnerable to depression, anxiety that is related to interpersonal relationships. So let's say maybe in a relationship with a man or with a family. So that's their thing. That's what normally depresses women. But obviously, it's not every woman that's gonna fall victim to that. And then men are more like economic situations or work-related problems or maybe legal issues. Like let's say maybe you got into trouble and now you can't get out of it.
Get out of it, yeah.
Yeah. So that's what they say. So this is just like in general.
Actually makes sense though if you think about it. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Let's go on. then. Let's go on.
Sure. The only depression that I know from ladies, man, is the postnatal one.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah, there's
That's
that.
the one that I know is quite freaky.
Yeah, even during gestation as well, like during pregnancy.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is that. They were saying that in SA, about 41% of women suffer from depression when they are pregnant.
Oh.
Mm.
I suppose it can be depressing though because of your imbalanced hormones
Your balance.
that are like highly
I
expressed.
guess, yeah. And another thing
Makes
with
sense.
women is that, hey, women are in trouble.
What?
The other thing with women is that I think about 8 to 10% of women are depressed during the menstrual periods.
But obviously, it's still the same hormone. Right?
Exactly. That's
Yeah,
what
the
I'm saying.
hormones
Like
are
it's,
imbalanced. But
Yeah.
you've seen it yourself, man. If you're dating someone,
yeah, but it's considered a disorder
Huh?
for some people because it's only 8 to 10% who are like really really moody
Oh,
to
okay.
to a depression point, right? So
Or
I
some
mean,
kind
other
of
people are just like irritable and not wanting to be touched
Oh,
and stuff like
okay.
that. But certain women are just like, I'm down and out at this point. But it's only seasonal like that. Like it's after the hormonal changes, then everything
Then
is back to
go back to
normal.
normal.
now.
Mm.
Is it?
Yeah.
Sure.
Mm.
Wow. I never really thought of it in that way, man. I suppose it's hard to tell though if someone is just depressed or annoyed at that
It
specific
is
time.
hard to
and
tell.
being moody.
It is hard to tell.
You never
Because,
totally know.
because the symptoms are just like your general symptoms,
Yeah.
tiredness,
Of being moody.
Yeah, exactly.
you know, something like that. So
Mm.
it's hard to tell. I think until someone is suicidal, that's when you can start to say, okay, yeah,
Mm.
this person is probably depressed.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can't
Yeah,
really tell.
it's not as easy, and
Can't
they
really
don't
tell.
really open up most of the time. Or
Yeah.
maybe they do things to present their condition, and then we are just blind to that because
Yeah.
maybe we just think, this person is trying to gather some
Seek
attention.
attention,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm. But like,
This
are we
is one of the
speaking about
stages.
clinical depression here, or just
Also, yeah, I think right now we just
just
I
a
don't know.
variety of
if you have
depressions?
enough information to at least give us a good I think you had explained
Hmm.
clinical depression and just general forms of depression, but it does appear as though clinical depression will be the most extreme of
Yeah.
normal depression,
The
right? So
most
it's like
common
Hmm.
so now when these stats are put out, it's mostly we're gonna say put together.
Hmm.
So it's not to say lesser forms of depression and
Yeah. Yeah.
extreme forms. It's
Yeah.
just together.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I think most people just have functioning depression though. Well, at least I have
Mm-hmm.
or had functioning depression. I don't know if I still have it. Hard to
Okay.
say. I think maybe you just learn to live with it. It doesn't bother you
Yeah.
as much over time. But I don't know, man. Like, 'cause I've been thinking about what could have caused me to be depressed, man. But it's a hard one to think, man.
Is it?
But let me see. Because the thing is, it's hard to say when depression actually kicks in.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, for me, I was born here in Cape Town
Okay.
back in the 90s, obviously, 93.
Mm-hmm.
But then, obviously, at the time, it was the end of the regime of the apartheid.
Mm.
But then, obviously, there was like this black on black violence. So where I was staying in the township,
Mm-hmm.
Crossroads, there was like this big war, man, where people were getting burned, killed, in houses, people
Yeah,
getting burnt
that's-
inside the
so
house.
they're
all of
exposed
this
That's
to
stuff.
insane, yeah.
I wasn't exposed. I mean, maybe I was, but I was a kid. I couldn't have known what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was sick, so my mom took me away to go and live with my grandmother in Lesotho for some time.
Mm.
But then I think most of the problems actually started when I started becoming maybe a 6, 7, 8. The awareness, obviously, you become aware of where you are and what is happening.
Mm.
You understand? So I don't think I would have been depressed there, man. But I think for me, what the problem that I had that led to depression is my ability to sort of just not do what everyone else is doing. I think it's much more simpler for you if you just engage in what people are doing. If where you are, if where you stay, your culture does a specific thing, you simply just
Yeah,
go along
you
with it.
tend to just
You tend to be accepted within the
Mhm.
culture. It doesn't feel weird for you. People don't find you strange or whatever.
Mm.
But I think for me, naturally, the way I am as a person, I'm not necessarily a person that just goes along with everything, man.
Mm.
So people can tend to be like, He's a peculiar one.
Yeah.
Yeah, of
You
course,
get
yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, I get it.
So where I'm from, people normally just go, man, and shepherding, being a shepherd, looking after cows because they have cows in their family. It's a village type of place.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Whereas in my family, we had lost all our cattle, so the only things we had was just dogs and some chickens maybe. So we didn't have cattle.
You guys are bougie, huh? Everybody else is living the village life, and you guys have dogs. Like,
No, everyone else has dogs, man. My point is everyone
Yeah,
has
I'll play
dogs
with
and
you.
chicken. Yeah, but we just didn't have the big cattle and the horses.
oh, I see. Yeah.
So I felt, why should I go look after someone else's cattle and be a shepherd for who? This is not my cattle. It's not our family's cattle. I'm
Yeah, I
not
understand
obliged
that.
to it. But I think the point I was missing out on is being socialized at that time. You don't become socialized unless I'm a boy, man. I can't be sitting at home alone. I said.
Yeah.
I see.
You need to sort of be around, even if they are not your cattle. Being around those people exposes you to what other guys will be exposed to.
Exactly.
Being bullied, the harshness, and it makes you tougher as a person,
Okay.
So that's kind of like a way of being socialized, I guess, in the village. I guess that's how they socialize you. But as for me, I was more interested in, because we were in such a secluded place, man, in the mountains. The city is like a mountainous place, so you possibly not see people for miles, bro. Just mountains, just mountains until
Large
you get-
stretches of land. Yeah.
You see.
Until it's, yeah.
So sometimes there would be like, obviously we had cars, man, like taxis or whatever. But mostly like taxis just to to take people from one place to another. Then a few people might have cars, but most of their cars they would work here in South Africa, so their cars would be here. But they'll
Okay.
just go home like during the December holidays, and then you would see a car. So my point is, I was more the curious type of guy myself, playing with clay or wires, listening to
I
someone
see.
making music, trying to figure out how do you make that sound. Sitting with all the guys as they do whatever they do. So I think I just didn't have the ability to relate to other people who are in my age group.
I
That's where
see.
the isolation started becoming.
Oh, okay.
So I
Yeah,
just
but
had
it does make sense.
yeah. So I only had 2 guys who were my friends. But obviously they were sort of socialized. They would go do whatever the guys were doing later.
Making
on.
us jealous here, man. You had friends before. I'm kidding.
Well,
I'm playing.
so my point is, man, like at the time I didn't think I was depressed, man, because there were always girls around me. I was just, it's fun being around girls. It has some
Yeah,
some
of course. Yeah,
benefits.
there's perks. Yeah.
It has its perks. It's cool. So but then my aunt passed away, who was sort of raising me as my mom at the time. And then I was sort of forced to move away now from there to here, to South Africa.
Okay.
Then when I got here now, Bright was like a totally drastic, different world. I don't think I was depressed when I was in Lesotho. I just felt like, there was just something missing. It's weird.
I
Always
see.
look at the mountains and figure, I wonder what's on the other side. But I think
So
everyone
maybe at
has
the time when you were in Lesotho, like you were still building your personality, right? So
sort of.
I guess maybe a message that you were trying to put across right now is that that personality that you came with from Lesotho didn't really fit with the environment. Like you say, it's drastic, right? So you weren't
It wasn't
properly
fitting in
prepared
there.
for. Yeah, it wasn't there, but it was not as drastic, right?
It
Like
wasn't-
it's,
yeah, it wasn't
exactly.
as
So it's like now you come to a faster way of life, I guess, and then now you have to
Sort of adapt again quickly.
exactly.
Because then when I came here, I stayed in Gansbaai, which was like an Afrikaans-speaking place. Way more compressed. The villages is way more space, man. You have your space.
Yeah.
You can sit the whole day without encountering someone because they're all away. You meet them at school. After school, everyone goes to shepherding and whatever. And I do my shit. Whereas here, you meet people at school. After school again, everything is
Oh,
just
it's
here.
the same thing. Yeah, of
Everything
course.
is
Yeah,
here.
I
Yeah.
see.
It's way more quicker. These guns, and obviously I came from more. I suppose you could say a more humble, primitive way of living. No,
Oh, I
no
see.
TV, no nothing, just a radio. all of that. You get here, people just look at you like you're some idiot because
No, I see.
Yeah,
You
sort
don't
of
know much. Yeah, in
the
a
village
sense, yeah.
boy type of thing. You sort of
Exactly.
have to
I mean, you
adapt.
stand out now.
Now you stand out, really
Yeah.
stand out. So I think for me, all of the stuff was sort of overwhelming.
Oh, I
My
see.
aunt passing away, moving into a new place, and always just moving around because we were always just moving, man. I never stayed in
Yeah.
one place. Just learning, man, because I think that's when my mind sort of became exposed to the world. Like, oh, these white people. Like I knew
Yeah.
these white people, but you don't
Never
fully
seen
understand the
Mm.
concept of it. Like, what is a white person?
I
Yeah.
see. Exactly.
So I think I just had to learn a lot of stuff at a very short time, man. Because now you have to catch up with everyone. Here.
Yeah, that's true.
You were born here. You know what television is, what a PlayStation is. I'm sort of new, man. You're telling me this stuff. I'm like,
Yeah, well, what the hell is going on here?
so you're sort of
Right, what's that about?
yeah. So
I see you playing with boxes there that emit light. What is that?
you should have seen me the first time I saw lights at night when I was like, oh, it's night, but it's still bright.
Yeah, what's going on?
I'm like, what is this? So it's electricity. Where does it come from? it's like lightning.
Yeah, well, I mean,
you look like an idiot.
they
you
have
know,
to be like that. Obviously, you are not gonna understand if they don't tell you something that you can relate to.
Yeah, so I think my point is with that stuff is that this alienation, man, and inability to sort of adapt quickly or being forced to adapt quickly without fully understanding why it is that you sort of have to adapt because you don't fully understand the lifestyle. You're new to it. You know, I think for me it was kind of like the biggest thing. So I'd always just isolate myself as I'm used to when I was where I was. Even so I think that isolation and the lack of being able to adapt was sort of one of the biggest causes. And I think suppressed emotions of my aunt passing away.
Oh,
Definitely.
Yeah, I think because like as a kid you don't know how to feel about it.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
she's dead, but what does it mean? Still
And
a
you
kid.
don't even have the bigger understanding. of
Yeah,
what-
exactly.
Yeah, so I think as I grew up, those feelings sort of caught up to me, and I used to understand what death is exactly.
Yeah.
I don't think everyone like you fully understand what death is, but your conception of it, you sort of build up this know like, okay, this person is never coming back.
Yeah.
You know, then these things sort of depress you.
Exactly.
And I think the way that I was sort of like a snob, man, back in the village, because we were not really the poorest people. So yeah, I didn't really understand like the things that I had then, the benefits that I had as compared to the guys who were shepherding. I never understood why I had to shepherd, because even though we didn't have cattle, my family worked, so they would send money, so I was always like fine.
Oh, I see.
But then when I moved here, we were sort of the lowest, like super dirt poor. Then you start,
I see.
everything flips, man. It's almost like your world is flipped upside down, and
It's heartbreaking.
you know, like,
It
depresses
is heartbreaking.
you, man. You're like, wow, now I'm
I
like,
mean, especially if you're living a good life and for some reason now you change it to a different demographic and then you are at your lowest point. I remember like when we were in Zim and mom would be sending money and all that, right? Like that was like a really good thing. Like we obviously, we were the bourgeois. Exactly.
the bourgeoisie.
Now you get here, you find out like you're living in a much better house in Zim than the one that you're coming to.
That's exactly
Right? And so it's like I do get your point.
Yeah,
it's,
bro,
it's
like,
crazy.
Yeah, it hits hard, especially when you start
It's
understanding
heartbreaking,
where
yeah.
your position now is in life.
Exactly.
You're like, shit, I should have stayed in a village.
Yeah.
Life would have been much more simpler, perhaps. But yeah, bro, like, and that's where the challenges become now. And the worst thing now again is you're a city person in a Xhosa-dominated environment. Tribalistic people, Xhosa people were very tribalistic when I first moved in. And if you can't speak Xhosa very well, they'll sort of.
You're selected against them. You're discriminated all the time.
So I think there were so many things, man, happening at the same time for me that I sort of had to grasp. But because you're a guy, you can't be bitching about it, man. You know, it's supposed to be just tough and take it as it comes.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Yeah,
I won't get to the tribalistic part of it. It will take us a whole day, another episode. So, but what I want to know
we'll get
from
to
your
that.
story, man, is did you seek help? Did you talk to anyone about it, or did
But
you?
how, bro? Like honestly, I wasn't sure how would you seek help for such things. Like I think as a guy, you're simply just expected to. If you feel down, you
deal
feel
with
like this,
things.
just deal with it, bro. Like you're a guy. Everyone goes through shit.
Yeah, of course.
Because like I think I had asked my sister a few times because my sister was at UWC doing law. So I figured she's educated. She might know what the hell is happening with me. But then she just said, no, everyone goes through what you're going through.
I see. Yeah,
So I was like, okay.
it's not really easy to understand for people that haven't really felt it before, because I think like especially for a person that's as educated as your sister, right? Like doing law, it's also a thing that eludes them because now you're gonna find somebody saying these things and it sounds so much just like sadness.
That's basically it.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like now it is sadness though. Depression is sadness. It's just like
it's just
over
a
a long period of time. and it's-
sadness,
Exactly. So now it becomes problematic now, especially if you can't work, right? So it's crazy. And I feel you when you say you just didn't know what to do and where to get help, because even now if we look at the stats, it appears as though for people that suffer from any of the conditions that we spoke about, right? For 100,000 people that feel a certain way about their mind, right? There are only 18 beds available for such treatment
You see now, what's the point?
in South Africa.
Yeah, but I think the best way for such things is to take your child to a psychiatrist, man, if you see that they're behaving in an abnormal way. But I think for us, especially in the townships, like poor black people anyway, who have not yet been
exposed
to what your child could be suffering from and what you can do about it, you're sort of forced to sort of bear it, man. The question now just becomes, are you strong enough to handle whatever depression you're having? Luckily for me, I was able to cope with whatever depression I was having. I was still functional with depression. And then other people normally, like, I would hear of girls committing suicide. It was mostly girls who committed suicide. So chances are I was not the only dude suffering from depression. It's just that, I don't know. It's not something that you would normally speak about in a conversation with guys.
I see.
How would you even bring it up in a conversation? Like, yo, dude.
Yeah,
I'm sad.
exactly. I mean, it's more of a pride thing with us. So you know,
Yeah.
constantly trying to brush your ego against other people's egos.
You
and
see- you see who's
what's
the
going
weaker
on.
one.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't want to present yourself as the weakest one in the clan. So
Yeah, but that's for girls, bro. Yeah, there was a lot, well, not a large amount, but there was a few girls who had committed suicide that I knew. But I think for them it was mostly relationship stuff. But it could have been something more, and we just assumed.
Even relationship stuff is still can drive you to that point. But what I've gathered from your two stories is that depression or mental illness in an African context lacks awareness. African people, or even educated ones, as you say, your sister had law, but she wasn't exposed to mental health awareness. I think I think there's a lack in that aspect, which is why in an African context we treat mental illness as just a phase that you go through and just get over it, you'll be fine. In actual fact, it's the opposite. So that's what I've gathered in your two stories, that there isn't enough mental health awareness, which is why we have this problem. For example, if you go to states, you have people who have anorexia, who starve themselves because they want to be seen like these models. But if you come to in Africa,
that's not necessarily a problem.
It's not the same problem because we are not in the same spectrum in terms of economy. If you tell an African parent that a certain girl has died because she was starving, a certain Western girl has died because she was starving herself, whether there was food. It's a different story altogether. They'll just shoot that
How do
away.
you starve when food is there?
I'm sure a Somalian kid will be looking at you in a big surprise, like,
what's going on with
do you know how much we starve here and you're killing yourself
Just
when there's food?
because they don't want to eat.
Yeah.
It is a disorder, but if you come in Africa, it's a total different thing. So I feel like
No, but
awareness is not enough.
it's
when
not
it
enough.
comes
But
to
I think
mental
that,
health illness.
but I think even if awareness was there, man, because I mean, in the
Yeah.
States, people do
I
have
was gonna
awareness.
go there as well.
I think the biggest problem is people not understanding that struggle is
Exactly.
relative. Because you may stay in the same street, have exactly the same financial worth, and I would be totally depressed, and you wouldn't understand because you are not feeling it.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It's almost like, because I think in my lab we have a lot of guys from North Africa, you know, Uganda and all those guys. They always complain about how we have, we have it easy in South Africa.
of course, yeah.
That why are we sad and all of that stuff like that, and then why are we always complaining about stuff? But the thing is, it's quite simple. It's like Einstein says about the law of relativity. Right? You see things from your perspective.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Possibly, if I was to move from South Africa and go live in his environment, I would be like, wow, shit, my life is quite simple. But I'm here now. And as a relative to
course,
my
yeah.
environment, I'm suffering.
Yeah, of course.
I'm still suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really true.
You understand? So I think that's where the problem is. You may tell someone that you're struggling. To them, they may be able to handle what you are going through.
And I also
So they
think
don't
that,
understand why
you know,
you're suffering. from it.
bringing your 2 points together, right? I do understand that there isn't enough awareness in the African context, right? We don't really know about that.
Yeah.
But I also think that, and that struggle is relative, like you're saying, right? So it's like problems are going to be different, like depending on which demographic you come from, right? But I think a problem that is common in both cases is that even though there is awareness in one demographic and that in the other there is not, right? Similar problems still persist, right? And this is because I think the problem itself is not fully understood. I don't think people, even psychologists, fully understand depression. And most people go to...
But then that's the
for
key.
Huh?
But then that's the key, right? People become depressed because they are not understood. That is the whole point of it. If you actually think about it.
Exactly.
No one
Right,
really
so-
understands
and
what you're going through.
It's crazy that most people actually, let me not say most people. Some people actually get, resolve their issues and they're okay now after a while. Some people don't, even after having state-of-the-art care. Because I think the one thing that we ought to acknowledge is that this is actually a sickness, right, that causes actual conformational changes in the brain, right? So it's like, for as long as that is not fixed, you're not going to get better.
Honestly, bro, based on me anyway, it can't be a universal case. But from what I've noticed is, even if you go to I think the most important thing is to be aware of what you're going through at first, obviously. Know that you're depressed. I'm depressed. I'm not sad, I'm depressed, obviously. Yeah? Then you have to sort of, I think it's one thing to be aware of that you're sick and then going to someone to give you medication for it. As I said earlier, giving you antidepressants or speaking to a psychiatrist might help you resolve the symptoms that you might have. Obviously, if you're honest with the psychiatrist, they might actually help you get to the root as to what it is that is making you depressed. But then again, at the end of the day, I think it's still up to you